everybody, and welcome to the No Hair, All Heart podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Schmitz. Today's topic will be a sensitive one, but a very important one. Less than 1% of the American population self-identifies as transgender, and yet the transgender issue, the transgender situation, has become top of mind and the centerpiece for our politics and much of our discord, further fueling polarization and misunderstanding across the country. So today I have a guest who is one of the 1%, and I thought it would be very important to bring her on because I would dare to say most Americans have never met a transgender person, let alone heard from them or got to understand them. Before we go on, I want to express my own feelings about the issue, just to be completely transparent. I believe in human rights and equality. I believe that people are born with innate characteristics, whether it's the color of their skin, or the color of their eyes, or their sexual orientation or self-identification as being of a particular gender. This is my belief. It's been reinforced over the decades from knowing and understanding people of different races, different ethnicities, different sexual persuasions, and individuals who self-identify as a gender that might or might not be different from that assigned at their birth. So I just wanted to be transparent about my own beliefs coming into this conversation. I don't demand that you agree with me, and the purpose of this conversation isn't necessarily enlightenment, and it's certainly not persuasion. It is merely to have a conversation, gain understanding, and shed some light, if we can, on this transgender issue, which has become so front and center in our culture, in our politics, much, I believe, to everyone's disadvantage. So now that I've set it up a little bit from my side, allow me to introduce Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie, and
Hey,
thanks for joining us.
hey, Mookie, thank you for letting me be on your platform. Could you say trans anymore? But it's a nice introduction, and yeah. Um,
Well,
I
I
want to begin with
apologize for bloviating too much, but I thought I would set it up in a way where I was transparent about myself
yeah.
and basically just open up the door to a good conversation so people can hear from you and maybe walk away with a better understanding about humanity, human nature, our culture, where we are and where we maybe could or should go.
Well, you're
So,
asking a lot from a conversation, and especially from one person, because I certainly do not speak for the entire transgendered community. I can only speak for me and my life experience. And going back to your introduction with what you said about, you would venture to say that not too many people know trans people. I would say that not too many people know that they were in contact with a transgendered person. Um, and I'm speaking by and large from like a generational perspective, because what is now under that umbrella of trans certainly wasn't it certainly wasn't there when I was coming up. And with that being said, um, in the arena that I came up with, it wasn't that we were afraid or we shied away from who we are or where we came from. It was just that, you know, we would try to minimize our differences in order just to assimilate into society because that was the ultimate goal. Back in the day, the ultimate goal for a trans individual was just to assimilate. People can say it called passing or not getting clocked or whatever it is. That's all we wanted to do. We wanted to assimilate because we understood that assimilation meant that our existence wouldn't be perceived as some type of a threat because I can only speak for myself that coming up from the get, I knew that who I was different than the environment around me. And with that knowledge, I also knew that who I was also created a threat to the environment around me. And so with that, I always felt like I had to, not just think, a few steps ahead. I had to think a few yards ahead. And little did I know, I didn't have the vocabulary or the life experience to be able to articulate it now. I just found that to be for a real transgendered individual, just an innate passage of a life, a rite of passage, just for survival.
So if I can paraphrase, a goal was blending in, which
That was it.
is that was it. I Not to make waves, not to create controversy, not to draw attention to you or make any demands on those around you, but simply to, as you say, assimilate, blend into society and just be, in your case, just another girl.
And that was it. And that was it because blending into society meant that we would not be othered. Because to be othered was to prepare yourself for a life of less than, less opportunities, less fairness. Now, for me, I could say that, my passage and my transition, it was not a political statement. For me, it was just an act of survival. Real trans people, they don't transition to pretend to be something that they're not. They transition to stop pretending what they were assigned to be.
Yeah, I think you're reiterating my point early on, and I am personally of the belief I'm a air quote cis male, so I self-identify as male. My biology is male. There's never any doubt as to my maleness, but I also assert that there's a percentage of the population embodied and personified by people like yourself who were born different than that, born this way, to quote the song. But I think that that's accurate. And I think what you're saying is that you didn't transition so much as simply express who you were born to be.
And I mean, and along the way during that, I mean, it was a price. There was a heavy price that needed to be paid, and not just personally, but like on a societal level. Um,
Could we go back for a second to your statement again about, okay, so you're born this way, but you're born different. Your very presence is disruptive because most folks are comfortable with the notion that there are men who are men and women who are women. We hear that over and over again. There's only two biological sexes, and therefore there's only two categories in which to view any human. And your very existence, in a sense, violates or goes against this biological reality. So the argument goes. So you fly under the radar. You choose to blend in as a survival technique, but also as a matter of lifestyle. And I think that this is significant because, as we all know, the American left, epitomized by a lot of what's come only in the last 5, 10, 15 years, has taken an active approach to changing that foundational reality. So there's been an effort to bring trans rights, gay rights, and now especially trans rights front and center, and to, in a sense, mandate equal treatment, but in a way that does the opposite of your blending. It brings extra attention to this relatively small minority within the population to a degree that has created a backlash to that backlash, which we're experiencing in droves right now, exemplified by, and again, I'm not playing political sides here either, but the number one ad spend of the Trump campaign was dedicated to what would be considered an anti-trans campaign.
Well, I don't know how we're going to talk about this subject without being political.
Oh, I understand that, but
So,
I'm merely stating that I am not expressing a preference one way or another for the point of this podcast, liberal or conservative, Trump or Biden. What I'm trying to get at is the emphasis that's now being placed on this whiplash to the whiplash, because you talk about the need to blend in, you talk about growing up blending in, you talk about your own lifestyle basically of just living the life of an American woman, right? And the left, the political left, has taken it upon themselves to transform, if you will, that undercurrent of disruption and lack of ease, that sense of prejudice and bigotry, which created this situation in the first place that forced you to blend in, if that makes sense.
well,
I think, in all fairness, the left has been struggling to transform society in a way where someone like you and the 1% ostensibly of the population like you should innately feel comfort. There should be the elimination of any kind of bias or discomfort. We should all learn that people are people. Let's accept everybody and change your ways, change your attitude, change your behavior. We will change our educational system to accommodate that. We will, in a sense, force people to use signature lines with he, she, they, them. And we will bring this sense of equality and fairness top line so that all Americans, in a sense, are forced to be educated about this. Is that
well,
is
see,
that
that's
is
where it
that
comes in. Well, that's where the rub comes in, that force.
right?
Now,
Right. Right.
so you want, so the left wants, this push for acceptance for trans people. We can't do that with people of color. So when we can get that, we haven't gotten that part down yet. And now you want a society to, you how do I want to go about this? Let me say this much. If a transgendered person transitions correctly, and what I mean by that, I mean, like for myself, my transition, everyone's transition is personal. Everyone's transition is personal. Um, my mannerisms, my voice, things of that nature, they were just there before the physical could catch up. However, there were things that had to be taken care of in order for me to present correctly. And what I mean by correctly, I mean the exact opposite of what's going on now. As it stands right now, according to the left, you, Mookie, as you present right now, if you wake up tomorrow and you say, I feel like a woman, the left will have us giving you the respects and the rights of every woman because your feelings matter. You didn't have to do anything to justify or validate your transgenderism. You didn't have to do anything to validate or acknowledge your gender dysphoria other than saying I feel like a woman. And then what happens is that, with that going on, people who like really got it, really grasped what it was for them to blend into society so that they could just go about living their lives. We are in that riptide as well. So really, at this point, I used to identify as a democratic socialist. Now I just feel politically homeless because quite honestly, I just feel that both parties are pieces of shit. So, I don't know where I stand with this, but I would just wish that people who really didn't understood the subject, people who really weren't living the experience, I wish they would stop talking for people that really were, because we probably wouldn't have this issue as it stands right now. The advocates that they get, you know, they toe that party line. You know, there are some very articulate, there are some very eloquent trans activists, you know, that they were able to garner. And oh, these people, they're beautifully worded, and they're well read and stuff like that. But everything that they say, it is always with this undertone of victimization. And it's just like, these new kids coming up, they will, and this is again generational, they will never understand what it really was. And yet, because their feelings or the vibe is off, they feel so offended. They feel like they need a safe space. They feel, you know, they just needed to be protected. Baby, if you crossed a bridge in your mind where you thought to yourself that me being born biologically, that this was not going to cut it, and that you were going to cross over to present to the other side, darling, when you cross that bridge, you got to pay a toll. And that toll is having your feelings hurt. That toll is you are going to pay a cost. None of us got through this unscathed. And now the political climate is, well, no, nobody should have to feel that. Why? Why?
Yeah.
Without any type of stimuli, without any type of challenge, there is no character development.
Yeah, that's
And
why I wanted to bring you on, because you have such a perspective that shatters the stereotypical mold that I believe most Americans are under regarding this whole trans challenge. There's this tacit understanding of left and right, these extreme polarized sides, and you're bringing a tremendous amount of nuance and also personal frustration to being misrepresented, not only from the right, but also from the left, from ostensibly people who've been going out of their way to empower you, to protect you, and to re-engineer much of American mainstream society with the goal of protecting you and empowering you.
Mookie, let me say this. The frustration came through a lifelong exposure to quote unquote trans people that found out that there was an affirmation for being labeled a victim. And when victimhood is being rewarded, you are definitely going to get a lot of counterfeiters. So earlier in my life, I'm currently still in the beauty industry, but I was in the beauty industry years and years ago, and you know, during that time, I was still in my transition and all that stuff, and you know, I'm of Latina descent, and you know, the one thing that we know how to do is grow hair. So while I was taking care of, you know, of the things that I needed to take care of, that I knew that I needed to take care of in order to successfully blend in society, I was working right next to somebody who took a couple of hormones, and then the next thing you know is coming to work in a black velvet strip dress with 3 inches of pan stick makeup and demanding the same respect and the same accommodations as somebody that was going, that it wasn't a game. It wasn't a game to them. This individual would sit in the middle of the window of a beauty shop and pluck their beard and you know, discussing their transition to their clients. You know, oh, I'm going to get this procedure done. I'm going to get that procedure done. And it just drove me crazy. And, you know, and at that point, the reason why I was at that beauty salon was because I was making 60% of my commission. So the money held me there. But trust me, it really was an awakening. This individual went on to go on and get the full surgery. Throughout the entire process, this individual was applauded and affirmed, and it was just more like a spectacle. And I remember this person came up to me and said, "Oh, one of my clients would like a manicure." I'm like, "Okay, sure." And so their client sat down and she asked me, she goes, "Oh, are you like them?" And I'm like, "No, I'm nothing like that." That pissed me off so bad. The the lack of discretion, the lack of professionalism, and just the spectacle of it all. And that's when I found out, like, oh, I really have got to separate myself from this, because this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well. So this individual did all of the things that, society deemed that you were going to do as a transgendered person. And this individual to this day is still unhappy. So when people say that, this is a mental defect, I can understand why they say that. And then for people that are very comfortable with who they are and what they had to do to get to where they're at, who just want to live their life, go to work, go home, pay their bills, and that's it. You don't see that many people, because it is not behooving to us to align ourselves with that group. So so going back to what you said, you believe that a lot of people have not ever met a transgendered person. Again, I reiterate, they probably did and didn't know it, because being transsexual or being transgendered was so far down the list of who they were celebrating themselves as a person and bringing those attributes up to the fore, so that by the time you got down to it, it wasn't an issue. It should never be an issue.
See, this is fascinating, because if I would say what you said, even after I made my disclaimer at the beginning of this episode, or if these words that you have just said would be through the mouth of someone who would self identify, let's say, in today's climate as a Republican conservative or even a Trump supporter, the recoil effect, especially from the left, would be intense. You would hear homophobia, you would hear racism, you would
Oh, how
hear
about this, Mookie? How about, because
all of these epithets, right?
these statements and these views, this is not the first time I've ever said that. And I've said it in mixed company. And I've gone, "Oh, you must be self-loathing." No, quite actually the opposite. I know who I am. I know who I am. But because I don't prescribe to this victimhood, because because I know that personally I am stronger than the circumstances that I came up against. And because I don't revel in that shit, oh, I must be self-loathing. The truth makes people very, very uncomfortable. And the funny thing is that the people that have all kinds of descriptions for who I am, or how I view myself, are the same people that think that they're fighting for me.
100%. That's why I brought you on, girlfriend, because again, I don't think you're alone in expressing these ideas. But what makes this distinctive is you are a self identified trans person who is outraged by many of the extremes that our society is going through, ostensibly with the goal of protecting your ass. So, this idea of victimization, this idea of treating a minority extra, extra, super duper special to the point where we all need to bend over backwards to accommodate, reinforces two things. It reinforces, on the one hand, that sense of victimhood, and it creates this whiplash to the whiplash backlash effect, which enrages mainstream America, which has precipitated its own political movement, which has backfired on the very people who are trying to save your ass, the very people who are suffering from this, which is namely you and
Well,
your fellow.
let's do this, Smokey. Let me say, and I understand when you say trying to save your ass and trying to save you. I know you're talking about the collective you. I get that. For me, I don't need saving. For me, I know who I am. I'm very comfortable with who I am. And not only am I comfortable with who I am, I'm so comfortable with who I am. Currently, like I said, I'm in spaces, with genetic female. I'm not saying cis, I'm saying biological women. I'm sharing bathrooms with biological women, not cis, biological women. And I do my business, I wash my hands, and I leave. I worked very hard at posing no threat to their environment. If anything, women should be protected. And I'm going to say this. I saw this shit coming. I was working at O'Hare Airport. And this was, oh Jesus, maybe 15 years ago. And as I'm trying to race to the terminal where I'm working, I was doing nails there. It was like a little spa at O'Hare. At every kiosk, I saw Vanity Fair, and I saw Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn, with the title Woman of the Year. And I knew at this point, this is not going to go down well. This big motherfucker hasn't had a vagina for over a month, and now society is deeming them as Woman of the Year. And I'm just like, so let me pull this together. So Bruce Jenner got married 3 times after being a world Olympian, got married 3 times, and at the age of 70, after 3 marriages and siring all these children, decided, oh, I'm transgendered. I'm going to be a woman. So after you've lived your life insulated with power, with money, now you decide, and you wait a minute, and wait a minute, and the hubris to accept that award of Woman of the Year as if they were deserving of it. You never had to sacrifice anything, Bruce. You didn't have to go through any of the humiliation. You never had to go through anything that other trans people had to go through. And yet, not only did you want to become Woman of the Year, but you want to call yourself a representative of the transgendered movement. If you don't get the fuck out of here. And that told me a lot of things, though, Mookie. An individual can swim in a swimming pool of estrogen and have a team of plastic surgeons, but baby, it is hard. It's hard to get rid of white male privilege. Oh, that's hard.
That's fascinating. The Chappelle skit about this. He goes, hey, Caitlyn Jenner won Woman of the Year, and then they're gonna give Eminem, the N word of the year. Same kind of thing, right? Which is creating a personality, writing off a certain sense of privilege. But doing so, here's the pushback that people might give you, and I'm just gonna play devil's advocate
Sure.
to trigger the conversation
Sure.
here.
Go ahead.
Most of America, I would reiterate, at least on the surface, don't know a transgendered person. They don't know a story like your story. And this idea that a biological man, if you will, lives like a woman or wants to transition is fairly radical. It's disruptive, makes people very, very uncomfortable.
But
So there's
Mookie,
there's a there's a belief, hang on just one second. There's a belief that a high profile celebrity like Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn, who comes on out and boldly, if you will, and ostentatiously makes this transformation in such a extreme way, and then is lionized for it, given the title of Woman of the Year. The attitude here, and again, I'm just framing this from the vantage point of what I believe the intent is. If you're validating a transition like this and giving it an award which makes it official, if you will, then you're normalizing it. There's an attempt at high profile normalization of trans people with this kind of celebrity accolade. That
Well,
I
I mean,
think that's the intent, girlfriend. I'm
okay,
just
but
trying to
Mookie, you want to
frame
know
it for the sake of the conversation. So
okay, and that's
I'm
fine, Mookie.
curious about your point of view about that
So
intent. You
Mookie,
sensed it was you sensed trouble was coming. And
so Mookie,
trouble did come. So
so Mookie, the road to hell is paved with good intentions now, isn't
well,
it?
exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so the road to
You
hell is
put it
paved
wrong.
with good intentions. All right. And wait a minute. Now let's go even further into Bruce. And I'll say Bruce. Um, the thing
You
is
see
that
that's what's great. I just want to do a timeout. What's great about this conversation is that these words and these opinions can only come really from you. And I'm not playing identity politics. I'm here. If anyone would know, you would know. And to me, they're very validating in the sense of your own personal experience. So this is kind of taking identity politics and turning it on its head,
well, the
because
thing is though, the thing is
you
though,
know
Mookie, is
what the
that
fuck
I
you're
mean,
talking about. Please
first
go
we've got
ahead.
to identify a couple of things, okay? First we
Okay,
got to
please do.
identify a couple of
Right.
things. At the point that Bruce decided he was going to quote unquote transition, that's not being a transgender. That was a bucket list. Okay, that was your bucket list, Bruce. All right. Again, you didn't sacrifice anything. You didn't sacrifice anything. And you came at the right time. You came at the right time. You came at the right time where society was like, oh, we've got to make this way for them and all this other bullshit. But yet there were trans women that really did some good work. And they never got those accolades. They never got those accolades. And yet, Bruce, here you are, fresh off your surgeon's table. You know, you've got designers, adjusting couture for your broad shoulders. And, you walk around as if you really did something.
But didn't Bruce do something? All right, again, it's like we know that there was a backlash to this, but can you admit that there was any normalization, if you will,
Mookie,
when
Mookie, define normalization, because when you sit there and you say that, some people, it might be that some people never came across a transgendered person or something like that. Again, I push back. Trans people have been here since time memorial. And the thing is that, you know what trans people wanted? They Listen, I can't speak for all trans people. I can only speak for me. I never wanted easy. I wanted fair. That was the most that I could ask for, is fair. Mookie, in 2008, when the bubble broke,
yeah,
I
we
was like
went into our recession, tough
I
times.
was like a lot of people, Mookie. I was like a lot of people, and I lost everything. I lost everything. Mookie, I couldn't even get a job at a Starbucks. I lost everything. And, you know, and again, this is somebody that graduated high school, that at that point had 2 years of college underneath their belt and could speak 2 languages. I couldn't find anything. And then, like a lot of trans people, the only thing that was available to me was sex work. Now, let me just say this much. At that point in the game, I'm not sitting here saying that I was traumatized. I'm not here saying that, anything bad happened to me. I've always been a bright girl. But the point is that I should have never had to have had that as an option. And so now I've got the right to have the same opportunity for employment like anybody else that's qualified. I can get an apartment. I can get medical services. Now,
But isn't this shit good? And don't you think it has to do with
it was
the
good, Mookie,
left fighting for but the left fighting
but
for your
Mookie,
ass?
we already had that, Mookie. We already had that without these RuPaul Drag Race wannabes,
Right.
you know, trying to like, oh, we've got so much to overcome. What? What do you have to overcome? You
Well,
never had to go through. You never had to go through the black market for estrogen. You don't have to go through the black market for female feminization the way most of these girls did with these bad silicone injections. You don't have to do any of those things. You've never been discriminated against a job. You can go to school. What more needed to be normalized?
well, you the level of anti-trans violence is statistically significant.
And that
You
Mookie,
have a lot
that
of that.
level
And
of
then hold
anti-trans.
on one second, just to frame the conversation, because I know we're headed in a very, very interesting direction, and it's a very unique direction that I'm sure many people are, their jaws are dropping hearing it from you. But just as a counterpoint, a lot of the air quote privileges that you've experienced over the years, from the 80s to the 90s, gay marriage becomes the law of the land, right? There's a sense of civil rights that's burgeoning across the country, which is a qualitative difference from what came before. And it's analogous, I think, in all fairness, to what happened to African American people, the civil rights movement. The rights for gay people came after the rights for African American people. And
Okay, so
a lot of that, I think, started from, I mean, how did white Americans come to know black people as real people? Well, through entertainment, music, drama, right? The Sidney Poitiers
okay,
of the world.
you said a whole lot. You said a whole lot. So
All
let's
right,
go
so
back.
I'm playing devil's advocate here in
Okay,
that
well, you know what? You're
it
playing devil's
sounds.
advocate to the degree that I'm losing my points. So let's talk about this trans violence. The majority of the trans violence that they happen to occur to black trans women. Let me ask you this: when the fuck did white America give a shit about black trans women? Okay,
What,
that's number one.
well,
That's number one.
when did the gay community give a shit about black trans women? Because they were always at the bottom of the gay pecking
No,
order, also.
even with that though, Mookie, even with
Yeah,
that, I still don't believe that the T should have ever been with that LGB.
yeah. See,
Gay,
that's
lesbian,
interesting too. That's very interesting too.
gay, lesbian, and bisexual. That's sexuality. Transgender has everything to do with gender identification and not sexuality. But it's
I
very
agree with you completely.
okay, but
Completely, I
it's
agree
very
with you.
comfortable because people want to put things in categories. Well, if you started off with a man and you're having sex with a man, then you must be gay. Okay,
Hundred
on it.
percent.
Okay,
100%.
on the outskirt, yeah, you're right. But if that's not how we are operating behind closed doors, then that argument is null and void. But just for the sake of being comfortable and being able to pigeonhole people, that was it. And then when you go back to white America, understanding black America, black American through entertainment, well, isn't that always the way? Isn't that always the way? When anything that is never known and is feared, we've got to shuck and jive our way into the hearts of America.
But that's my damn point, which is you had the Sidney Poitiers of the world looking all sophisticated and acting like, a air quote normal person. So maybe these black people aren't so bad. Same thing. And again, I'm stretching it maybe here with you, but when Bruce is Woman of the Year, aren't there some similarities to that? I mean,
Of what?
that's what's going on, which is
I
basically an attempt at normalizing and integrating this trans phenomena and showing that it's a little weird for most folks, but they're not gonna bite, they're not gonna rape your sister, and they're real people. They're just people who do this.
Normalizing Bruce Jenner as Woman of the Year to normalize trans existence is repugnant.
Okay, but why? Why is it repugnant?
Because we're not talking about somebody that lived a full trans experience.
Yeah, that's from your point of view, sweetheart. But from the point of view of most, these mainstream Americans, that's already some freaky shit. And if this Olympian, known for his masculine efforts in getting gold medals, can acquire titties, then maybe a dude acquiring titties ain't that freaky, and
Well, when you talk about, but then
maybe a lady like Ronnie shouldn't be disadvantaged. Maybe you should at the
let me
very
say this.
least have
Well, let me say this,
have the
Mookie.
rights of
Well, let me
everybody
say this,
else.
Mookie. I'll say this, Mookie. My existence was quantified way before Bruce decided he wanted to put on a pair of heels. Okay, so well,
I'm with you,
yeah,
right?
let's leave that off the table and stuff like that. So in other words, from what I got from you was that normalizing Bruce, who took 3 women down the aisle and swore before Jesus and 12 other respectable Jews to love, honor, and obey, knowing fully well,
Right.
who and what they were, and then proceeded to go through the motions and have children to solidify that masquerade. That is what the transgender movement needs to normalize itself.
No, but there are many, many gay people. You know them, I know them. There are many, many trans people who have had a similar trajectory as Bruce Caitlin, which is you're closeted, you can't be and do what you know you are and should be doing. But society has created a persona for you. You're taking on the metal of that persona because going against the grain is too painful. And then once you get the ability to break free and be yourself, then you be all you can be. I'm not sitting here on the side of Bruce Caitlin.
No, no, I get
I'm
that. No, no,
merely
no.
I'm trying to give some credit to decades of progressive ideology, if you will, that has brought about
Celebrating, Bruce
actual
Jenner.
benefit from a civil rights point of view to gay people and
Celebrating Bruce
trans
Jenner.
people.
Celebrating Bruce Jenner
I'm
for
not saying
going and get some.
I'm not
Are you
saying
gonna let
celebrate.
me talk?
I was talking until you interrupted me.
Go on. Well, the
So,
conversation means people got to get in there, Mookie. Okay,
I'm
and the
with you,
thing
but
is,
I'm just saying is that I'm trying to strike a balance right now, and it's for I'm sure we got listeners on both sides of this. Okay, we
and
got
that's fine.
listeners
Yeah,
that we
and
got
that's fine.
listeners who are 100% on your side, and they're coming at it from
But
you
Mookie, you got to understand something. I'm not here to get a side. I'm not here for a side. I'm
yeah,
strictly here to explain my point of view.
I
And
get
once
it,
again, exalting Bruce Jenner for the transgender movement is lazy. It's
I
low
get
hang-
it,
it's
right?
low hanging fruit. All right. And so if this was the left's poor excuse to exalt trans people, it failed miserably because guess what? Bruce decided that he was going to be Republican even after all.
100%,
So what are we
100%.
doing here? So what are we
Exactly,
doing here? And
exactly,
I didn't need Bruce Jenner to go get a set of titties so
right.
that I could, darling, if anything, I was the one that opened the door so that Bruce could come through.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. I'm with you. But Bruce might say the same thing that you are, sweetheart,
Yeah,
which is
Bruce
part of his embrace of the Trump side of the equation is stating a lot of the same things that you are,
well, he
which
has
is
no other alternative but to state those things.
yeah, okay, but
He has no other alternative but to state those things. Okay,
but there
yeah, Bruce, you got your gold medals as a man. You got your gold medals as a man. Now, me personally, I don't feel that female sports should be a failed male's athlete's plan B. So that's where me and Bruce go. That's where me and Bruce we align with each other. But Bruce, you got your kudos as a man, and you were cool with that. Okay, but once again, you sacrificed nothing. And the reason why you didn't come out sooner, Bruce, was because you knew the backlash, because you knew that the endorsements were going to go away, because you knew society was not ready for it. And once you found out that you were secure and you didn't need it because your little investments were okay and your money was good and you had all
right.
that stuff, that's when you decided to come out. And I'm supposed to be happy about that. I'm supposed
And
to look at Bruce Jenner. I'm supposed to look at Bruce Jenner as like the normalization of trans people. Sorry, darling, I'm not
But
buying it.
the message was not for you, sweetheart.
Who's
That's
it
my
for?
point. My point is I understand and I'm completely sympathetic to your outrage to the point of embracing it, laughing it, and cheering you on. But I'm looking at a different target audience. One person's outrage is another person's opportunity. So I get it, but the point you're making about it not ending up well is exactly correct. So what has obviously happened in the interim is again, as I began this conversation, you might have people who believe in gay rights. You might even have people who believe in trans rights, maybe with the exception of the sporting business, which we can talk about in a second, and you just alluded to. But you could have people who feel that gay people are fine and then at the same time be adamantly opposed to any kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion program, who feels outraged that as a society, as an institutional reality, we mandate through the government that you have to treat certain people special. That clearly backfired because Trump got a lot of minority voters. He got more black and Latino voters than any Republican ever.
And then how
So
did that
so
work
so
out?
so
How did
so
that
that
work out?
100%. I'm validating your assertion that this is backfired. Your first hunch that Bruce Caitlin is going to create a bigger problem than she is solving is categorically correct based on history. So
I had no, you know what? You are more than, I mean, it's your podcast, Mookie, and you could say all that stuff. I have no idea what Bruce Caitlin was supposed to do. I have no idea
no, you had
what.
a hunch. What I'm saying is you had a
Yep.
visceral hunch that this shit's gonna backfire. And
Well,
it
that wasn't
did.
the only thing.
And,
That
and,
wasn't, that
and
wasn't,
it did. And it
that
did.
wasn't the
That's
only,
the point I'm making.
that wasn't the only canary in the coal mine.
Right.
The rise of like RuPaul's Drag Race, and then and then there was that backlash about don't use the word she-male and all that. I was like, oh my God, there was too much light. There was too much light. I liked it better. I liked it better when no people knew trans people and it was okay. I liked it better when we could get our employment, where we couldn't be discriminated against housing, where there was adequate health care. And, all right. So, under that umbrella of the LGB, if it meant that I could marry somebody that was biologically a male, and that's how I started off with, and we decided like, okay, yeah, this is going to, go, this is going to be a go. I'm glad that I had that. I'm glad
Well,
that that was there.
that's no small thing. That is no
I'm
small
not
thing.
reducing that, Mookie. I'm not reducing that.
Well, good.
But this insistence of it being up in your face, I don't understand. All it's
Yeah.
done,
Well,
all it's
I'm
done, all it's done is put a mark on trans people's backs. Mookie, a couple of weeks ago, I've got a girlfriend, and we go back well over 20 years, and she had twins, fraternal twins. And one day she calls me up and she goes, the twins came out. They said that they're trans. I said, really? So she wants to be a he wants to be a she.
well, at least
I
it
can tell you
balances
right
out.
now, I could tell you right now, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. This this climate that we're living in, where when these kids come out and say they're this or they're that, and they've got to be affirmed, we are going to have a generation of mutilated individuals because no one knew how to say, pump the brakes, find out who you are fully. And if at the proper time, at the age of consent where you can do things, if you still feel that way, let's go on. Let's go on. But until then, let's see how things pan out. She calls me up and she wants me to speak to the son that now wants to be a daughter. And I'm like, you know, wait a minute. Why do you want me to talk to your kid? Oh, because they want to go to Chicago. I'm like, wait a minute. Do they have money to move to Chicago? No. I'm like, how old are they? And they're like, they're 18 years old. And I'm like, what do you want? What am I supposed to say? So the kid gets on the phone and without even saying hello, goes into this diatribe. Trump's in office now and I don't want to detransition and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, first off, you've only been on hormones for 2 months, so there's nothing to detransition. Secondly of all, what is supposed to happen in Chicago that's not going to happen in Texas where your family's at? Community. And I'm like, baby, I'm here to tell. Wait a minute, sweetheart. I'm here to tell you right now that unless you intend to be a sex worker, or unless your ambition is to be on the next season of RuPaul's Drag Race, this quote unquote community is not going to know what to do with you. Thirdly of all, but should have been the first thing of all, if an administration is going to make you this scared, this transgender life may not be the one you want. But I had to say that. Not their parent, but I did.
And that is why it's wonderful having you on right now, because you can say these things from your lived experience, and you can express your frustrations in a way that reinforces the common sense feeling of millions of Americans that this shit has gone completely out
It's
of
gone off
control.
the fucking rails.
Off the
It's gone
goddamn rails.
off the
And
fucking
again,
rails.
and that's why I set it up. I believe in human rights and innate characteristics, and I'm on board with you that people have gone nuts about this. I had a high school reunion with friends in Chicago last year. Many of us hadn't seen each other in a long time. I'm not exaggerating that 50% of the dudes who showed up at this reunion had children who self-identified as transgender. 50%. 50%. When in human history has 50% of people self-identified as transgender? And they described going through the hardships of making these critical life choices at the age of 14, 15. Clearly it's trending. If you're not trans, if you're not gay, you are uncool. You are boring and you are straight and you're part of the patriarchy. So is this endemic across America? No. But again, Chicago, urban center, the left has lost its fucking mind.
And
And
not only
that
is it
is,
losing its mind, and
yeah,
not
go
only is
ahead.
it losing its mind, it's going to lose its children.
Right.
It's going
Right.
to lose its children. And I don't want some parent looking at me and all my transsexualness having any sense of resentment, because I know who I know who I am, and I knew who I was at a very early age, and I was the one that was responsible for the. Listen, Mookie, my parents didn't have to pay for. They never had to pay for a hormone. They never had to pay for a treat. They never had to pay for anything, because if this was important enough for me, I would find a way to get to what I wanted. Now, this with social media, with parents that cannot parent, and with this social contagion of transgenderism, we're going to lose a generation.
Yeah, I categorically agree with you based on
Lose a generation.
based on my own experience. And other countries are smelling the coffee here. Germany, France, England, they're rescinding a lot of the more progressive, ostensibly left policies of enabling and encouraging surgery, hormones for kids who are too young to make up their own minds and too young to change the trajectory of their biological transformation. So you got to put
I remember,
guardrails on things, right? We don't let kids drive until they're 16. We don't let them drink until they're 18, until they're 21.
Mookie,
You can't get
in the
late.
climate that we're living in right now, I can tell you this much. I distinctly remember as a child, I had this fascination with butterflies. I loved butterflies. And I remember one time and I went, and I would go so far as to I would get paper bags and I would make wings and I would try to, fasten them to my back or something like that. And I went to my mom, I was like, Mommy, I want to be a butterfly. In the climate that we live in right now, my mother would have to have found a surgeon in order to give me my surgically altered antennas so I
Right.
could be a butterfly. What the fuck are we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah, and whom are we harming and whom are we empowering? So if you are opposed to this kind of madness, then you're instantly homophobic, transphobic, a racist, and a fascist. And that's the wedge which divides us. And this relatively small issue of this relatively small percentage of the population passionately inflames both sides of the political aisle for these respective reasons. There's a reaction and there's an overreaction, and everyone's nuts.
Mookie,
Everyone's lost their mind.
I was at a party. I was at a party last year. And prior to the party, I had seen something. There was a library in New York. I don't know if it was in one of the boroughs. I didn't know if it was in Manhattan. But anyway, they had to cancel. They had to cancel Drag Queen Story Hour. The library was getting threats. And I get to this party, and there were a lot of gay men there. And somebody had brought it up. And I said, well, for the sake of the children, maybe they shouldn't. And before I could finish that statement, this dude gets on his virtue soapbox and starts telling me that I'm transphobic. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be responsible for what I say. But what I'm not going to be responsible for is how you interpret that. And what I meant by the safety of the children, not that the drag queen was going to endanger those children, but these maniacs out there that feel so passionately about them, if they don't open fire, or if they don't, they don't throw a Molotov cocktail in the library, where there's books, where there's paper, where there's a lot of flammable shit, maybe they should have. But foremost and first and foremost, why did you automatically equate drag queens with transgendered people? And I said, sir, you're not equipped to have this. You're not equipped to have this conversation.
I want to let the listeners know, by the way, and I think this is an important part of this conversation, that you have significant realness, girl. As they say in the genre, if you will, you are pretty much unclockable. So that adds irony to this conversation that you're relating, but it also adds a sense of perspective to a lot of your lived
But
experiences that you're sharing right now.
but here it is,
So,
Mookie. Here it is. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because a lot of the things that are happening right now, the realness, that was work. That was work. And that was work that I took upon myself so that I could present myself in the best way that I could possibly. All right. That was for me. That was for me. Now, again, I had this coworker who thought that the end all and the be all was to get a vagina and that was going to magically cure everything. Well, unfortunately, it didn't. But I mean, it is what it is. But the thing is, though, is that once again, whether I came off or my presentation is on point or not, the things that I'm saying still hold relevancy. And
but in ways they hold even more, which is what I'm getting at, is that this need to blend is something that you fulfilled pretty much early on.
well, I mean,
And
it just it not to elaborate too much on Trump's agenda, but it's just common sense. And then with that trans movement, all of the pronouns, the he, she, we, they, them, zer.
Yeah,
And I'm like, wait,
can you share with the audience your preferred signature
it is
line,
not
which is
okay. Well, let me say this.
one of my favorite things. I reposted it on my Facebook page, and
Well, it's not. Well, it's not mine. And it came from one of the leaders. It came from, of course, Black women. One. She's a Chicago girl. She's a comedian. Flay Monroe. That's her thing. Her thing is he, she, we. She makes the money. He cashes the check. We go and pay him. We go spend it. But
no, but
but
I'm talking about the heteronormative Latina. What do you remember that signature line? It was just so funny. I just wanted to do that little
No,
tangent.
you know what, Mookie? I have so many flashes. I mean, it's the drugs hit at a certain point. So there's listen, I don't have a filter, so I'm just as shocked as everybody else at what comes out of my mouth. So I,
No, that's terrific. Anyway, I didn't mean to distract, but again,
I'm used to it
what
by now.
we're getting at is that maybe some of this idea of pulling the plug on DEI, maybe some of this idea on pulling the plug on these enforced fairness programs, on quotas, on affirmative action, on all the initiatives that have been done to right the wrongs of society have indeed backfired to the point where rescinding many of them and reevaluating our societal opinions and the institutional responsibilities of enforcing those opinions are in fact overdue. And the reevaluation of what's going on isn't necessarily the beginning of American fascism in ways, but there are many aspects of this that truly make sense and are necessary and long overdue. I think you
Well,
and I agree with that.
I mean, again, Mookie, I never wanted easy. I just wanted fair. Now, I will say this much. You know, I I try to indulge in as much critical thinking as I can. Thing is, though, is that we've gotten so far into our tribalism that that even an outside idea is a threat to that, and you can never get anything out. So this idea of DEI, well, it was made for a reason. And that reason was that people were not getting the opportunities that they should have gotten. Now, did it go too far? I don't know. I don't know. Ever since we opened from COVID, um, I have been, I've had to go back into the hospitality industry. And I have seen so many mediocre white men fail up that I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? But now, if I was to say something, oh, then that must be me having spoiled grapes or something like that. No, it's just that this dude doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. But yet he can speak corporatese. But yet he looks good in front of the house. So how he treats his staff, or how he goes about the bottom line, really isn't an issue. But let a woman, let a white woman, a Latina, or an African American woman. Wait a minute. Now, in a parallel universe, let a transsexual do all that. Oh, and HR must be called in at every second point of every second, moment of the day. So, I mean, I understand why he was there. But how about this? How about I don't know if we'll ever live in a world where we won't see color or what may or may not be between somebody's legs, and just see if they are fucking qualified. And we can go
Well,
from there.
yeah, I think the economy and society can be its own regulator. Years ago, I visited Caracas, Venezuela, and I think it's a relevant analog here. Just for a second, my sister was born there. We're a family of emigres. And when I went down to Caracas, Venezuela, this is prior to the Chavez Maduro implosion. But I'm down there, and the one thing I noticed is there was a paucity, if not a complete absence of racism. And the reason that that was the case was they were very blended racially. European stock, indigenous Indian stock, South American stock, Caribbean. You had dark skinned people with blonde hair. You had nappy headed white people. And it was all one big mix. And the differentiator down in South America was money. The hierarchical differentiation between high and low in society was how much money and how much power you had. It was no longer racial. It was a post-racial society because the power mechanism was delineated in a different kind of way. And I think that that seems to be not an ideal goal for the states, but we seem to be headed in a similar direction where it's not about being white and male, it's about being moneyed and powerful. And is that an advantage? I don't think that's necessarily some teleological goal that we got to head for. But the point I'm making, though, is what you and I are talking about is ideally, you believe in humanism and equal rights. Okay, you believe that everyone's born with innate characteristics, male, female, trans, black, white, whatever. But the way to head towards society being gender and race blind is not to come to the defense of particular minorities to the point where you're forcing society to behave, but setting up new standards by which excellence and accomplishment and success have nothing to do with these factors. Does that make sense? So
No,
I think we're trying to get at that if I'm right here.
and if that's the case, Smokey, and if money is the equalizing factor, I don't know too many people of color or too many people, let me put it to you this way. The amount of people of color with access to money is far less than those of Caucasian descent with access.
So how do you fix it? Because the left has been trying to do that.
Well, listen. Here it is. First off, we got to have some very real conversations, and saying that a 7-year-old can deem themselves a transgendered person, and society has got to bend to that will is not a realistic conversation. That's not a realistic conversation. And
But
when we are kowtowing to somebody, oh, we don't want to hurt their feelings, or what you said to me, I'm construing that as an act of violence. No, darling. No. A word cannot, how do I want to say this? It only has as much power as you allow it. And your low self-esteem is not going to be the problem of society at large. If you are going to be anything else other than, that's going to have to come with a fortitude. And baby, if you don't have it, then maybe this is not the life for you. Maybe you ought to be in this. Maybe you ought to stay in the shadows, because as long as human beings are going to be human beings, they are always going to view everything that is different as a threat.
totally. But what can society do about it? We're at a state right now where we've got this backlash to the backlash. And this has resulted in all fairness, unfairness, 100x toward transgender people, I think. There's anger, there's resentment, there's already an increase in incidences of violence against trans people. And you have become the boogeyman of this phase of American society. And we could say that the Democrats and the progressives, in a sense, have exaggerated this and have fed the fire. But it's kind of been like one step forward for human rights and civil rights and equality, and 2, 3, 4, 5 steps back. And I think this is a problem too. I agree with everything that you've said about the excesses of the air quote woke left, how all this is really backfired. But mainstream America now has a very perverse attitude, I think, of trans people as a result of all this. It's gone from kind of a par of okay, acceptance, tolerance, if you will. Tolerance is a bad word too, but enabling you to blend, to fly under the radar. Okay, and now I think it's become a negative situation where if you self-identify as trans, it's you got the target back on your head, girlfriend. And I think that
Well,
that's really we're in a bad situation right now.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And don't get me and Mookie, don't think for one moment that I'm not nervous. You know what I'm saying? I'm not nervous for myself in terms of any type of violence being acted against me. I grew up on Chicago's South Side. Trust me, I'm not afraid to take the red line. But what I am afraid is will my employment opportunities be the same? Now that now that you know these Democrats have shown themselves to be as feckless as they can be. Now that they put us in the middle of the fire, what happens to us now? What happens to us now? And so now it's incumbent on me to make sure that I'm as qualified as I can be in everything that I can do. During the COVID, I worked really hard to get my license to become a cosmetology teacher. And I was very excited about this. I love the industry that I'm at. And and it was all worked out for me. I was going to teach school during the day and I'm going to go back to the salon at night and it's going to be a wonderful life. I was contracted for 2 semesters. For 2 semesters. And I went in there like Michelle Obama. I'm going to leave no child behind. By the end of those 2 semesters, I was like, fuck these kids. And these kids nowadays, they need far more than what these teachers are able to provide at the price that these people are willing to pay these teachers. So I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Um, Parents are going to have to start learning how to parent again. And you've got all of these stimuli working against them. You've got social media, you've got the affirmation from like the society at large. And then when they take these kids to to the doctor to see what's going on, the medical industry, they're real good for, do you want a live daughter or a dead son, when that may not really be the case. So you've got these, your classmates, they're at a crossroads. And I mean, and the thing is, going with what medical industry says, do you want a live daughter or a dead son? Who's to say your daughter's not going to kill herself because she found out after all was said and done, that this was a mistake that you cannot go back to?
Yeah, it seems to be quite
It's
the
scary.
mess. So what is a possible fix it based on what we've talked about? Just to summarize, I'm a dude who believes in human rights and equality, and I believe that you are you. Now, I've known you for a long time, and you are genuine, you're honest, you're straightforward, and obviously you've got your opinions, and you're not shy sharing them. You're like the
No,
real. You're
no,
the
go
real.
ahead.
You're the real deal. However, saying all that, I don't fall into the liberal progressive side that we need to reconstruct our society and enable trans people to play soccer with girls in high school to protect your ass.
No,
So
no,
here
but what we
here
should do as
here's
a
here's the
society.
distinction. Here's the distinction where I believe in you. I love you. I want you to flourish. I want you to be safe. And yet, I think the Democrats and the progressive left have fucked this completely up.
So as
And
opposed
I
to
think
making
you
society,
agree. You agree as a trans person. It
so
sounds like we're aligned in that.
forcing society to choose. So as opposed to forcing society to choose to, they have to accept trans people. Why hasn't society made a way for trans people? Why in 2025 do trans people need to be forced into a binary? Why do trans people have to, they've got to choose between male or female bathrooms? Why isn't there a gender neutral bathroom? If a trans athlete wants to participate in a sport, the Special Olympics, it started off in somebody's backyard, and now it's global. So you mean to tell me that we can do this for people with physical and mental challenges, but we can't do this for a gender identification?
Bing, 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 which is have your own league. Have the trans league, right?
But somebody, Mookie, I'm gonna tell you something. This
Bingo.
fixation, this fixation with transgenderism, this is not organic. This is not organic. When it was all coming to the fore, I'm like, this is not natural. This is not natural. And this social contagion with these kids coming out and saying, I'm trans. No, you're not. You're not trans. You're spoiled. You don't get attention, and you think that putting trans in front of your pronoun is going to change something. No. So this manufactured attention on trans people, it was designed to do just what it's doing right now, and that is to put us in the crosshairs. Because again, we can make gender neutral bathrooms. We can make a league for transgendered athletes. You ever notice, Mookie? You ever notice how it's not the female to male athletes that are demanding that they're in certain sports?
Well, you wonder why.
You ever thought about that? But yet,
Right.
on an Olympic stage, that imposter, Lee Thompson, got his ass up there on that podium and proudly took that gold medal.
Well, that's led to an enormous, I mean, more so than any other singular event, that set that set trans people, gay people back 20 years. That
Yeah,
one
Mookie, stop
event.
putting gay people with trans issues. Stop
I
doing
get
it.
it. I know that that's a trigger for you. I get it. I
Well, no,
get
it's
it.
not a trigger. It's just that it's not. Trans people and gay people are separate. Okay, they
I
have a struggle, but they're separate.
I agree, but before it was it was civil rights for all disadvantaged minorities. And I categorically agree with you that the T in the LGBTQ plus is erroneous, because how you identify in terms of your gender has absolutely nothing to do with your sexual orientation.
Hmm.
So that is just categorically correct. It's more an expedience that happened because of community. If you look at the gay ghettos of most of the urban centers, especially like 70s, 80s, prior to, frankly, a lot of the civil rights that came down for gay people, it was only natural that trans people would be mingling with the gay community.
Well,
So
I mean,
the integration of the gay community with the trans community is obviously logical, but that's how it politically got lumped together. But in
right.
principle, and to your point, in practice, it's gummed the works and turned it into one big old mess. And the point I was making about gay people, though, because it's not that I believe in it, girlfriend, it's just that because gay people have been lumped together with trans people, gay people are paying the price too.
But gay people have larger numbers than
That's
trans.
true.
And
That's
not only
true.
that,
That's true.
and not only
Right.
that though, but for as much as trans women have been there on the forefront for the gay community has never given trans people the respect that they're due. Once again, if and I'm not saying for all, but by and large, if a trans individual is in shows up in a gay setting, if that trans individual is in pantomiming to the latest female top 20 or a sex worker, gay people don't know what to do with that. What
Well,
do you
well,
mean?
hold on for one second though, because from a political vantage point, It's been realigned. The trans component of the gay community now is actually the politically the most powerful. You know, when you have the gay parades in many of these cities, it's usually led by a trans person because there's been a 180-degree flip flop in terms of political correctness.
Oh
So
yeah, but
in gay communities, and you know this
well,
personally,
well,
I
look,
know this
if it
true
serves
that the
when it
very
serves the gay
the
community, when it serves the gay community, of course. When
yeah
it
the
serves the gay community, of course they're going to embrace them. But to look at a trans individual just as a person and not trans, the gay community falls short. Listen, I have been I have been in spaces with heterosexual people and have felt more normalized.
Oh, 100%.
You know,
But what I was getting at before your trans ass interrupted me is that the gay relationship with the trans community has been iffy from the start. If you're looking at power relationships in the gay community, the trans people have been at the bottom of the food chain.
always.
At the very top is the white, straight acting, muscular gay male, and at the very bottom always was the black tranny.
Hmm.
That's how it shook out. And I'm agreeing with you. It's come a long way since then, and ironically it's
Has
flipped
it?
180 degrees. It's flipped on its head. The African American transgendered person is now the political tip of the spear of the LGBTQ plus community
And again,
because
and that only happened when that black trans individual always came off as somebody that needed protection, somebody that came off as a victim.
100%. But that's why. That's the rationale. We are taking the victim and we're making this person the victimizer. And it's this inversion, it's this flip flop that has happened from the 80s to the 90s to the teens, and now 2025, prior to the Trump resurgence, and to a certain extent precipitating it, has been this flip flop where we take those at the bottom and we bring them to the top. And de facto, when you do that, the waterfall cascades in the other direction too. We take people at the top and we bring them to the bottom. And that's triggered the hell out of a lot of mainstream America, where they felt, going all the way back to affirmative action, DEI, you're taking my rights away as a white person. You say that I'm privileged, you're taking away my privilege when all I'm doing is living my life. And that's been the backlash. And
Well,
that's a
and then
lot of
and
what we're
again,
talking
Mookie,
about.
and again, it has been very orchestrated. It has been very orchestrated because if you take a room full of transgendered people, people that presented themselves as trans, and you ask them, do you want to take so and so's rights away? None of them would want that. It's all how this has been presented. And again, trans people have been in the crosshairs.
Absolutely. Trans people have gotten the worst of all of this because, to your exact point, it's not about the person. It's about the identity. And it's not even the identity that you take on yourself, it's the identity that society gives you by want of your feelings about yourself for their own benefit that's got nothing to do with you.
It's not their benefit. It's not
You
their benefit. It's their
you're being
comfort level.
used. You're being used. And the sad irony is that using trans people to gain benefit politically is as bad, and I'm mentioning precipitated the use of trans people as a target. Going back to the number one ad that the Trumpers used, and the number one ad that was proven most effective was the trans ad, was Kamala Harris saying that, you know, prisoners should be able to get on the taxpayer's dime, you know, elective gender
And I,
reassignment
I,
surgery.
I'm like, and
Boom.
I never had an idea. I had no idea that that was actually going on. I mean, when you are in prison, it's because you did something against society. And with that being said, I mean, as a society, we say, you got a right to, safety and medical care and meals. But changing your sex, sweetheart, if you didn't take care of that on the outside, we damn sure ain't going to take care of that now.
Yeah,
Now,
but again, it's forcing the issue down everyone's throat and then triggering the hell out of people who otherwise wouldn't give a shit.
no, and then it's funny too because you've got somebody that dodged the war due to bone spurs, but thank God it didn't hinder his golf game at all. Um, Determining how veterans should be doing that, but no
Well,
one talks about that.
well, of course not, because you've got ironies abound, and when it's us versus them, then hypocrisy is your language. But all that aside, though, it's a shame what's happened with this ricochet effect from the left to the right to the left to the right, and it's only getting worse for people like yourself who are misunderstood, used. And here's my take on it too, just to add a little bit of creative flavor to this. Throughout history, the trans person was looked at as almost a holy person. Priests of the temple, the artists, the poets, and going into even contemporary music, David Bowie, Lou Reed, the androgynous trans look, even goth metal. You know what I mean? You got these guys with the long hair and nail polish, and they epitomize this kind of hyper masculinity that came out the other end, and they looked like girls. And to me, as a creative person, I think this is another tragedy that's happening, which is the whole trans idea, this idea that we're all male and female in various characteristics, that even sexuality is along a spectrum. No one is completely straight or gay, right? It's the essence of human self-expression is our individuality down to the molecular DNA level, right? We're all unique, we're all special, and no one is all boy or girl. Everyone is a combination of all these traits. And the greatest art and creativity, the Mona fucking Lisa is allegedly a self portrait of Leonardo da Vinci in drag, for fuck's sakes.
See, but
It, it, it,
everything you're saying right now, I've heard all those things, and it comes off as like a quantification to being trans, and I'm like, yeah, they were all there. What the fuck does that have to do with me? Because when I crossed the bridges in my mind to present female, I didn't know about fucking Leonardo da Vinci. You know what I'm saying? And those quantifications, it's very low hanging fruit. How about this? I would just like to get to a point where it's like, you know unless we're in the bedroom, what I may or may not have in between my legs shouldn't make any fucking difference into you just giving me the common respect that you would give anybody else, and we keep it moving.
I'm with you. I'm with you. But what I'm telling you, as a compliment to your ass,
Yeah.
is that whether you like it or not, we're all special, but you are special, girlfriend. You have a fascinating, interesting sense of self and position in society in the world. And all I'm saying is it's like we would be doing our society a disservice if you are in a sense just like everybody else. You're not like everybody else. And I think that's the biggest tragedy of everything that's happened, which is some people have put your ass on a pedestal and other people have abused your ass. You've been used by the left and by the right when this idea of the third sex, if you will, is just so fascinating and is just so great for society. I'm just expressing my bald-headed opinion. I think trans people are fascinating. I think people like you need to be heard. And I think that one of the greatest disservices that we have done and continue to do as a society is, on the one hand, to marginalize you and shut you the fuck up, and on the other, treat you front and center in terms of the target of everyone's animosity and misunderstanding.
Well, I'm just going to say this, Mookie. I mean, that is certainly your opinion, but the fact of the matter is that, like, trans people, all they want, again, is just they. I don't want to be on a pedestal. I just want to be able to go home and be able to pay my bills and call it a day. The only one that I want to celebrate me is the dude that is interested in me, and that is it. And that is it. Once again, when you put the spotlight on somebody and say this person needs to be celebrated, that's that's not an opinion that is shared by all. And those people that want to come to the table and learn, that's okay. That's fine. But once again, that spotlight, oh, these trans people, they're really interesting. Oh, these trans people, they endure. These trans people are really resistant. Do you know about trans people? People don't give a shit about that. And it's not their job to give a shit about that. At the end of the day, everybody just wants the same thing. And when you focus the light on something that is different, all you are doing is highlighting the difficulties that the other people have and making that person that you're shining the light on the focal point of that.
Yeah, you are like the Coleman Hughes of the trans community. And I don't know if you know Coleman Hughes, but he's an African American guy who's saying the same goddamn thing about African American folks and how they have been treated and are being treated. Only it's even more poignant and important when you say it now, because the spotlight is there and the abuse is there. And I do appreciate your pushback, because there's this artistic side to me which is like, ooh, trans cool. And what you're saying is, shut the fuck up, Mookie. You're just this dumb bald ass white guy who's like,
You're,
hey, I
you're
want to hang
definitely
out, with the tranny. And then I get what you're saying,
you're
but at the same,
definitely bald, but you're not stupid. But at the same
okay,
time,
but
though,
I love this shit. But to your point though, I don't go about forcing my opinion on anyone else. I just express it. Maybe
right.
more so than people
And
want to hear.
and
But
my
I'm
thing
in,
is
but
that,
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing
no,
with you that this shit backfires.
but again, Mookie, again, you're agreeing with me. But here's the thing: the basis of this conversation is that it's not for you to agree or disagree. It's these are and once again, I do not speak for the whole trans community. I'm speaking from my lived experience. Babe, there may be a trans person that says I can't stand this bitch,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's fine. And that's fine. Here it is. If you are trans, you listen, and it just goes across the board. If you're coming from less, or if you're coming from someplace different, that means you're going to have to work harder. That's just it. It's not right. It's not fair. It is what it is. So work harder. But this idea that because you are different, you need to be treated special. Oh no, sweetheart. You're putting a mark on my back. And
Yep.
that I'm not
And
going to.
that is the biggest, that a lot of people are wondering about what the Democrats are going to do to counteract the fact that Harris Waltz got their ass handed back to them.
Well,
And
I mean, I'm not looking.
hold on one second. There's Democrats who think that the entire Democratic agenda should be turned up inside. They need to re-strategize and figure out what the fuck went wrong and
To that
recalibrate.
point.
And then there's Democrats who think everything's fine. It's just Biden stayed in too long.
Well, and to
And
that point, the restructuring and stuff like that. There's talk about, oh, we're going to throw trans people underneath the bus now. Migrants and trans. Really? So
well,
when we were
that's
convenient,
what I'm getting at. Yeah,
when it was
that's what.
convenient, it was good. So once again, both political parties are shit. So
Yes.
I'm not looking either way. And the thing is, Mookie's like, listen, I I voted for the brown lady. Not because I felt that she was the best, because we didn't get a primary. So I don't know who the best was. But because I knew And because I knew what was coming down the pike, because I knew that for 8 years he was gathering his forces and he was going to be more powerful now than he was back then. Again, I didn't vote for her because I thought she was the brightest. I didn't vote for her because I thought she was the best. I voted for her because I thought that she would be a deterrent to what was going down, what was coming. But I also voted for Biden because in 2016, it was like, this is going to, or in 2020, I should say, this is going to be the election of our lifetime. And for 4 years, I kept hearing the Democrat. He is a existential threat to democracy. Well, if he was that much of a threat, what did the Democratic Party do to prevent him from coming back into power? Except for the fact that Merrick Garland waited 3 fucking years before he decided to do something. And now that that Harrison Waltz got their asses handed to them. Now we have AOC, one of the most charismatic, one of the most articulate speakers in the Democratic Party. She wanted to be up for the Speaker of the Oversight Committee, and you had Nancy Pelosi, 89-year-old Nancy Pelosi from Germany, speaking from her hospital bed, from getting a new hip, and saying, "No, we're going to put this white man with esophageal cancer in there." I'm not looking at the Democratic Party to save my ass. They can barely save themselves.
Yep, yep. Well, I agree with you. I voted for Harris too because there were so many problems, but at the very least, let's err on the side of maybe protecting rather than flat out abusing. But here we are. Here we are, for better or for worse.
Well, I'm gonna say this,
There's gonna be some good, but there's gonna be a lot of bad. And
Mookie,
it's awesome to have you on and to hear your voice, because I don't think there are too many conversations that went like this. And I don't think there's too many conversations that are as important as this, because, as you say, it's not about left and right, Republican and Democrat. It's about just respecting people to be who they are without forcing other people to respect people for who they are, and just leave people be. Let them alone.
Well, and the funny thing about it though, Mookie, is that for as much as these people, they say that like the Republicans, oh, they can't stand trans people, and for the Democrats that, oh, we want to protect them and stuff like that. You know, uh, when it comes to, I think it was, oh God, it was a study, and it was about pornography and Pornhub. And they said in the red states there is more trans porn being downloaded in the red states than in the blue states.
Surprise!
What are we doing?
Surprise! That's because they went through all the stepmom porn, and now they just need a little spice.
And I'm just, it is what it. But Mookie, listen, it's really funny because, listen, I never looked at the Republicans to do anything for me. I never looked at them to do anything for me. And when I voice my opinions on the Democrats, my blue MAGA people, they're like, well, blah, 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 and it's crazy. It's crazy. I can't do this time around what I did the last time he was in office. I can't do it. He's only been in office for 16 days at the recording of this podcast. And there is so much shit that's thrown at the wall, and there's so much outrage, and and my only question is, so what did the Democrats do? What are the Democrats doing? What are they? And the thing is that the way well, here in Chicago, or at least in my little circle, it's just like, aren't you pissed off at the Republicans? Well, no, because they kind of let us know what was going on. They told us what their agenda was.
Well, it's the promises made, promises kept. And frankly, regardless which side your ass sits on the aisle, it's promises made, promises so far kept. And Americans knew what they were getting themselves into and wanted it. And the big reason they wanted it is because they didn't want any more Biden and they didn't want any more of the Democrats. It was a slim margin of victory, but it was significant enough to give him the
And wait,
majority.
and let's stay right
And
there. Stay right there, Mookie. And not only was it a slim margin, the Democrats didn't even have the tenacity to say we want a recount.
well, because they didn't want to appear as anti-democratic.
Yeah, because those appearances really matter when you've
Well,
got
well,
a South
that's that
African.
that's the tragedy of it. So now here we are. Okay, we got the beginning of the Trump administration. You've got a bunch. He just signed another executive order this time. Mandating that federal funds will be pulled from schools if they do transgender sports, if they force transgenders. Now, you and I agree in principle that that's fucked up. Not necessarily rescinding the federal funds, but this idea of forcing sporting teams to accommodate, especially the male to female transgender person. So everything is mixed up.
You
You
got
and I, right? Based on this
you got
whole
Lee Thompson.
conversation, we're
You
we're
got
like
Lee.
we're like we agree with that decision. Schools should not force male to female, especially transgender people, on sporting teams. But then you got a president mandating this, and you've got this upsurge in anti-trans hatred as a result. It is a shit show.
And then you've got Lee Thompson standing on the podium of the Olympics, winning that gold medal like he earned it. Going back to that dressing room, going back to that locker room, taking off his sweatsuit, dick flying all around with a bunch of women. That is called inclusion.
Yeah, well, everyone has lost
If
their mind.
you
So
don't
whether
get the
this, yeah,
if you don't get the fuck out of here with that bullshit.
yeah, so whether this is the end of the American Empire or the beginning of something new, we're at a crossroads. Can I have your ass back on in like 6 months so we can talk
Absolutely
about it?
not.
All
This was
right.
painful trying to get a word in edgewise with your
Well,
ass.
yeah,
No.
the listeners will disagree. They will feel that this
You know,
white
for your dear listeners,
this
yes.
bald white man was abused throughout this conversation. You were using your privilege, girl. That's what I
Yeah.
think
Well,
was going on.
it's mine to use, goddammit. So
I'm gonna put a clock to how much of this podcast you were talking and how much I was talking. I was like,
you do just that, and as the guest, I should have the lion's share. Anyway, but
I,
no, Mookie, thank you. Hey, congratulations on all on this and stuff like that. And the thing is that I really do feel it is your time. It is. I really do feel it is your time, and I hope that this really does what it's supposed to do for you. You are a good host, darling, and I
well,
mean,
I appreciate it, but I just use my opportunity to start, bloviating and sharing my shit to share the ideas and opinions of people just like yourself, people who
yeah.
need to be heard, people who haven't been heard, and people who could really affect change. And I'm just kind of a conduit for voices like yours. And I think this was a really robust, healthy conversation that a lot of people need to hear to
Well, I'm gonna
shake
tell you,
shit
a lot
up.
of people are not going. A lot of people ain't gonna like this, and I don't care.
Well, let's
Just
throw it out there,
let
girlfriend.
me just
So
say this much. Let me say this
thank
much,
you.
darling. You are entitled to your opinion.
Yeah,
I
I know.
don't
You've been
care.
you disagree with me whenever you can,
No, no,
and
no, 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 no. See, Mookie, that's what happens when you're talking. I was talking to the preemptive listeners that may disagree
oh,
with
see,
me.
I
Yeah,
don't
see,
even
that's
pay attention. That's proof.
exactly because you're too busy
Yeah.
talking. But the point is that no one has to agree with what I said. You can even hate it, but know this, dear listeners, I don't care. That's it.
All right. I think that kind of nails it home, which is basically you are just trying to mind your own business in this
And
topsy-turvy,
I don't want to
crazy
be
world.
I do not want
Don't
to be a political cause. I
Right.
want the same thing that everybody else has, an opportunity. No more, no less.
Amen to that. And that is the fitting end to this episode of the No Hair All Heart podcast. I'm the mofo with no hair, and Ronnie has shown some real heart and honesty. So applause to you, girlfriend. Woohoo!
All right, Mooks, you stay blessed, baby. I'm out of here.
Cheerios.
All right.
Cheerios. Bye
Bye,
bye.
baby.
Bye bye.